This is the portion now of the webinar where we threw the floor open to our audience, and we've got a big audience today to ask your questions. So please do type away questions in the chat box, or put your hand up, or turn your mic on and ask questions. I'll just pause to see if anything pops into the chat box immediately. If not, oh, I thought I saw movement there, but no. I'll leave you a little while longer to think. Maybe like a question for both of you is like what you found the greatest challenge when you were sort of setting about these initiatives. What were the barriers that you had to overcome, and how did you do it? So perhaps I'll come to the NHS team first.
I'd say the business case really for procuring an appropriate digital archive in the first place. There was quite a lot to go through, really. As I said in our talk at the start, just getting it recognised as a high scoring trust-wide risk in the first place. You know, the risks associated with not having a system, and then going to IT as well, to sort out the technical side of it and get. So yeah, it was the approvals, the recognition of how important it really was, and then once we had all of that, it was then the business case. I'd say it took from the start of the process to the point where we were able to go ahead and procure the system. I think it was about a year. So it was a long, slow process, and because no other trusts had ever done it before, there was nowhere for me to go to see what had been done before,
what to do,
or to ask advice from anyone else, because it hadn't been done before. So so I'd say that was the biggest hurdle, I think. And now it's trying to really promote it and get other trusts in the position where they're able to also procure either the use of the system through us or go into archive them directly.
Yeah. So you're trailblazers, really, and you've kind of taken all of that pain for all of the people that are coming after you, I guess. So, well, hats off to you for taking that initiative and for doing that. There's actually a message in the chat box for you now. Mark from the University of Notre Dame asks, what is the typical size of a digital records data set you deal with? Is there an upper limit size-wise to what you will accept?
No, so there's no limit. In the system itself, in Archivum, there's no limit that I know of. So I think that's one of the real selling points of it as well, like to the research teams, because knowing that as they transition from this hybrid situation where a lot is currently on paper, but then they are having increasing numbers of digital records, to suddenly there'll be no paper. Like once the trial master files are created in these ETMF systems, there won't be any paper. So knowing that no matter how big the files are or what format they're in, I think there are only a few formats that we wouldn't be able to accept. I think it's more or less anything that's any size. Obviously, the more storage we need, the more we have to pay for it. But yeah, to like technically wise, technology wise, I don't think there is a limit.
Right. Well, great. More questions for you. I'll direct these ones to you, and then we'll go to the Bits and Bots team. Benjamin from the Derbyshire Record Office asks, what did you use to assess the risks to your data? You mentioned there was a big risk matrix and that you'd identified that this was a particularly high risk, but how did you work that out?
It was looking at things like yeah, things like damage to the trust reputation, if you know, in the research world, because BARTS is huge in the research world. We conduct so much research in partnership with so many other trusts and organisations that I think you know, if we, as I mentioned during the talk, if we were really having to say we can't take any digital records, we can only take the paper but not the digital, then you know, then it's, well, yeah, we're not providing that full service. So then also linking it to the financial side, really, you know, at the moment we get quite a lot of income for storing paper. But that is, as time goes on, we're taking in less paper and there'll be more digital. So we really did have to do something because, you know, things like inappropriate access or records being lost or inaccessible, you know, that's not, you can't have that in the research world because, you know, the credibility of the research team and the study would really suffer, and just, yeah, the impact on patients as well and healthcare. You know, um, the research is so important for healthcare that if the records weren't accessible, or you know, particularly over 25 or 30 years for records relating to medicines, yeah, it was really important to really get that across.
So
Um,
presumably you had your own risk matrix internally anyway, and you were able to just kind of flag things, these risks upon that.
Yeah, so it was, I think the main risk that we associated it to was, uh, yeah, damage to reputation and
Mm.
enforcement action, you know, for the
Yeah.
data protection side of it, and, you know, the information security and things. And then it's the likelihood of that being, you know, like the worst case scenario, the likelihood of, you know, things like, yeah, and just, it was quite a time consuming process. So going through the whole risk assessment, it did take quite a while, and yeah, it wasn't
Yeah.
easy. But I mean, having said that, though, it was clear that it would be a high scoring risk.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's this internal matrix really that we used to show, yeah, how yeah, these things really were quite likely without a proper system.
Without appropriate action. Yeah. Yeah. Ah. And I think connected to this, perhaps, is the next question from Helena at the Bank of England. She says, you said you could only use Archivum as a solution. Could you remind her of the reasons you gave? So I think this is probably connected to some of those risks and mitigating them, right?
Yeah, so really Archivum is the only system we found that not only meets records management and digital preservation requirements for records generally, but the key thing was that it meets all of the research standards and the regulations. And as Emma said during the presentation, you know, it meets the data security and protection toolkit, the NHS. It meets all, it ticks all the boxes for
Mhm.
research, because research records are so heavily regulated, you know, just like the studies that they relate to. It transfers to the storage of the records once the study's closed as well. So they're very strict. You know, you can fail inspections if the records aren't stored appropriately. So yeah, Archivum really was the only one that could prove and demonstrate that they meet all of the regulations and the standards.
Very
So
good. Okay, well, thank you. So Bits and Bots team, you gave us a few kind of lessons learned when you kind of were reflecting on the process. Is there like a really sort of big challenge that you were faced with at any point? And how would you do it differently, perhaps, if you were faced with that again? Any of you to pick that one up?
Yeah, but sure, if anyone else wants to, because I've presented already, but otherwise I will do it.
I can do it if you want
Okay.
to. Yeah, I think for us the biggest challenge sort of was making sure everything works and is set up to go. So we spend a lot of time debating on which platform would work the best. That's how we came for Discord, because you don't have to send an email to everyone, and also because it lowers the barriers between people interacting with each other. Because it's really overwhelming if you have a bigger group and you have a question that you have to email everyone. So we wanted to get away from that. But setting up the Discord server took some time as well, and it still takes some time because you want to have some roles and not having everyone see the admin shizzle channel. So
Sorry about that.
and then also making sure that people had the modules, so making sure those were ready every time, setting up the expert sessions. I think we started it a bit naive, perhaps, even being like, oh yeah, we'll just do a study group and it will be fun. And it is fun. It definitely is fun. But also it's a lot more work than we thought. But I think for this year, it will help that we have a basis ready. And we can now build on what we have done last year and make it better instead of building it from scratch. So it will be a better year for us, I think.
I'm not sure any of us completed our own modules. I think there were other people in our course who we were sort of teaching or writing the modules for, who completed all of them and now know coding a lot better than us because we were so busy trying to write it and do all the admin. Yeah.
So it sounds like quite a time-consuming. Well, Lottie, you said it was a time-consuming exercise. How did do your organisation support you to do this? Because this was done in your own time, right?
Yeah.
So how does that work?
Well, for me, as I said, when we started this initiative, I was still working at the National Library, and they were quite supportive about this. And I was just like, hey, I want to learn more about Python. But then not halfway through, but halfway through planning, I just switched jobs. So I remember my job interview at the National Archive. I was like, oh yeah, one other thing, I'm starting a study group. And they were like, oh yeah, you work with Lotte, right? I said, yeah. Oh yeah, well, no, we know about it. No, it's fine. It doesn't cost you a lot of time now, will it? And I was like, no. And it did. But when we started talking about this nomination, they were really, really supportive. And they really see this as like, how do you say, like professionalism of others in the field, and not only the National Archives in the Netherlands, but they really recognize our international part of our jobs. So they're really supportive about this. And they also say, no, if you have to do something during working hours, I mean, I still have my core business tasks. I mean, I have to do other things as well, but we still can do this and we get time for it. So they're really supportive about it.
And Lotte, I assume the same for you because you work for the same organisation. How about you, Francesca?
Yes, I've been very lucky to have a lot of support. I think when I started sort of doing this, it was still a lot in my free time, and I thought, oh, that's fine, I'll just keep it as a free time thing. But it sort of slowly started to encroach into work with the meeting times and everything, and I got a lot of support from my team, so I was very lucky for that as well.
Yeah, it sounds like you've got plans for this year to run a whole other set of modules, but lots of the way you were speaking sounded like it, you imagined it probably would run on. It would run and run. You've created a monster, I think you said in your own words. So how do you envisage sustaining this in the longer term? Do you have any ideas about that?
So I think for this year, it's more of improving what we have. So that's why we haven't added another track. There were ideas to do that, but we have not done that because we just want to make great what is already there first before adding new stuff in there. But there are ideas to do new things. I think because we have a GitHub repository, even if something happens to all three of us, which hopefully doesn't, but we still have the GitHub repo then, and people can add to that. I don't know who will do the pull requests at that point, but so yeah, we will always have the GitHub repo if it isn't sustainable to do all the meetings anymore, and if this year would be the last cohort. We don't have plans for that, but we would still have a GitHub repo where people can find all the resources. So the modules are there, the mini guides are there. We try to put everything from the expert sessions there, so it will be a long-lasting learning thing that is there.
Yeah,
Excellent.
and maybe to add to that, because as we're speaking, the numbers are adding up. So we have now 122 people that say they're interested in our kickoff meeting. So thank you, and please continue signing up. But
Yeah.
maybe, who knows, one of them will take over from us for next year. I mean, we have done our part now, and maybe they say like, hey, I want to develop a third track. I mean, you're more than welcome to do so. It just costs you a lot of time, but it's worth it. Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Great stuff. There's a message, another message from Mark from the University of Notre Dame, who asks, for your next session, are you sticking with Python and web skills as your core areas? I think, Lotte, you said, yeah, it's an improvement on that still, isn't it?
Yeah.
Is there any demand in the group for, say, JavaScript or TypeScript skills?
So JavaScript is actually in the front, so we're calling it the front end development track. And JavaScript is a part of that, which is really nice. And for if there is interest in something, but it isn't a big interest, we can also make a mini guide on it. So for instance, I'm quite interested in R. So it might be that we do a little R guide. So it doesn't become an entire track, but it just is a sort of mini guide. But I can also see Francesca is trying to say something.
No, I was just going to jump in about JavaScript. So the front-end development module is instead of going into one coding language in depth, you sort of get almost tasters of different bits, and then it becomes slightly more unorganized or unformed or kind of up to your own learning towards the end. So you can like really focus on JavaScript if you want to make a final website, or you can move more towards prototyping or UX, or you can decide you want to really advance your CSS skills and make it your website way more interactive. And it kind of gives you the options to go explore different areas. But there's one point, I think, where the JavaScript and Python kind of almost link up across the modules. So you can like take some of the same things you were doing in Python and do them in JavaScript later on. We try and make it quite consistent with the expert sessions. And so I don't know if we're talking about functions in an expert session, we're trying to make it so that you'll have maybe learnt that in JavaScript and also in Python at the same time. It's not perfect, but yeah.
Super. And a thumbs up from Mark, I think, from that. Switching back to the NHS team, we've got another question for you about the integration between the Archivum system and your SharePoint. Does it? I suppose is the first question, or is it a manual process? I don't know which of you would like to take that.
It is possible to integrate Archivum with SharePoint. Unfortunately, we can't do that because we're in the NHS shared tenant for Microsoft 365, and unfortunately, it means that we're quite restricted in what we can do. We basically have to get NHS England's permission to do anything and to integrate anything. And it's so, yeah, unfortunately, they said no, didn't let us do that. So we haven't been able to. So we have to download the files and then ingest and do that. I mean, it's not a huge problem. You know, it's quite easy really to do it the other way. But yeah, so it is possible. If you're not in this shared tenant, then I believe it's quite easy to integrate the two, so you can ingest directly from SharePoint. Yeah.
Very good. So perhaps we've got well, any more questions, anybody? But perhaps while we're waiting just to see if there are any more from the audience, I wondered if I could ask each of you for, in your capacity as, you know, the Digital Preservation Masterclass, is there one piece of advice you would offer Sandra and Emma, to people sort of starting out, sort of thinking back to where you were when you began this journey, one piece of advice for people starting out on this journey, and then for Bits and Bots, anybody looking for to start a journey learning code and coding to support digital preservation. So I'll come to the NHS team first.
I don't know if Emma, if you have some advice you want to give, or whether you're happy for me to, but I think for me, it would be, if something seems impossible, don't think it is impossible, because when I first joined the trust, we were talking, me and the trust archivist were talking about having a digital archive, and it was a dream because we never thought it would actually happen. So yeah, I'm glad that I did really push to implement something, and that I was able to achieve it after, really, it was quite a long time. It's quite a long journey, but yeah, I'd say even if you think something's not achievable because there are too many hurdles, then go for it anyway, because you just might be able to get there.
Good stuff. Persevere as well, I guess, and stick with it. Yeah, good advice.
Exactly, and fight your case. Yeah.
Yeah. Good stuff. Bits and Bots, how about you?
Yeah, I will start it, I think, and then Francesca and Suzanne can jump in at any time. I think when people are starting coding, I think oftentimes you feel like, oh, I need to make a program and it needs to work perfectly, and have really high expectations of themselves. And I think we need to leave that a bit behind. I think get yourself into a place where you can be like, oh, if I see a work file or HTML, I can understand it. So keep your expectation a bit lower and be gentle to yourself as well, and allow time for it as well. I think it's like learning a language, and you're not learning a language by doing it for like a month really rigorously. It's like learning a language. I think, Sarah, you have Duolingo as well. You have a streak of, I think, couple of hundred days.
600.
Yeah, same, almost 600 as well. So allow yourself time to learn the language and see it that way as well. So yeah, be gentle.
Good advice.
I was going to say it's also related to language, but also not. I think one of my biggest barriers into looking into tech and things like that is actually the terminology around it. It sounds really scary, but actually if you start breaking down what all those words are, or just sort of ignore them and get on with learning, it becomes a lot easier. I don't know, HTML and Python and JavaScript and GitHub and pull requests and pushing things to repos and all that stuff is just kind of jargon, like project management jargon. And if you sort of start ignoring that, it all seems a lot less scary suddenly.
And maybe last but not least, just do it. Just start. Just try it out. And if it's not working for you, try another language. I mean, not everybody has to learn Python because we thought of a Python track, of course. You just have to figure out what suits you best and try it out, I think. And also what we saw with various expert sessions is that, well, I called it stealing before, but that's one of the beauties of using GitHub. You can find a lot of code there, and you, of course, give credit to the one who made it in the first place. But for example, the preservation Python one that I mentioned is based on a Snake a game from somebody else. It's just adapted to another game, actually. So you really have to be creative with other people's work as well and build on that. You don't have to start from scratch. So yeah.
Excellent advice. Thank you all very, very much. So I think I might begin to wrap up, if I may, but I'll do that by inviting everybody to give you another round of applause, please, because that's been fabulous. Full of information, full of tips, full of good advice about how to get going in your various kind of aspects of digital preservation. So we're really grateful to you for coming along today and sharing that with us.